his master's degree from here. A guy named Royce Garvin, for a couple of years, he teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu out of the fit here, but it's only not any kids classes. There's RMA, but the head instructor, apparently he's a friend of mine. He's moving back to Texas, so I don't know how much longer that's going to go on. But Thunder Muay Thai, where I train at, the head instructor is Ty Pilgrim. He does Luta Libre, doing Muay Thai, and there's quite a bit of people there, and we've got some kids, mostly like in the age range of like 10 and up, but we're looking to probably start a little bit younger. But if you know where the sheriff's department is in town,
I should, but I don't.
It's if you look on South College Avenue.
Okay.
Do you know where kind of like the Domino's is in town, or the post office?
Yes.
So like almost straight right across from the post office where the Shell gas station is, that little like shopping center. Well, if you keep traveling across that parking lot, just straight in front of it, off to the right, behind that is the sheriff's department.
Okay, that's where that is. Yeah, okay.
I got it. Straight right across from it is there's like a little store, and then right next to that, catty cornered like this, is Thunder Muay Thai.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, I have a hard time remembering where I'm at most of the time, let alone where other things are at.
Yeah, I think the address is like 1002 South College Avenue.
Cool. All right, let's see what we're talking about today, because I don't know. It's 10 o'clock. 1, 2, 3. A few more people coming in. Let's see here. So last week we gotten into Walker. Not this one. It's this one. Yeah, no, it didn't give me where we left off. Talked about that stuff: democracy, accountability, procedural justice, that kind of stuff. Legitimacy of relations, transparency, accountability, de-escalation, use of force stuff. We'll talk a little bit about that maybe. Accountability, training. Okay. We'll have to have a talk about that one. That's a methodological one, actually, because it's one that's like, I really don't like that crime fighter image. All right. I might have to pull in the second chapter today. I don't know. We'll start with, I remember we talked about some de-escalation stuff for a little bit. Let's see, things going on today. Let's see, share. Okay, so you can now see my screen. Stuff I downloaded. That just came in, okay. I need to open up chapter 2, and actually I need to move the stuff over there because right now I'm not done that yet. In terms of the syllabus, we're running a little bit behind without a quiz, probably later today. Yeah. Let's see here. Why didn't it open it? I said open it. It downloaded it, didn't it? No, it didn't. There we go. Let's double check to see where we're at. Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Quiz 1, chapter 1. So we're moving into chapter 2 today. We're a little bit behind, not much though, because we're moving into chapter 3. Yeah. Okay. So let me go ahead and grab chapter 2. Current course. Here's the last time I taught it. I don't think there's been any changes in those. Boop. 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 Accelerated. So we'll grab this one too. Boop. Grab that one. History. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. Okay. Chapter 1. So last time we were talking about de-escalation. What is it?
To bring down to calm a situation that might be heightened due to anger, fear, anxiety, anything like that, to try to, get people to be less aggressive.
Yeah.
To be more compliant.
Definitely it's going to be both verbal and, I shouldn't say slash, say and, I said. Nonverbal in nature. It's one of those things that's really interesting because if you look at the nature of force and the way that things can go versus the ways that people try to move versus what it actually does. Like, I like playing with things in terms of positives and negatives. So it's like, +1, -1 kind of thing. And this is one where like use of force stuff, typically what you're talking about is +1. I think we talked about that last time. You need to be able to control the situation, have control of the situation, you need to be able to wrap your arms around it. That's gonna be +1. You know, that kind of thing. Because it's verbal and you need to put your hands on somebody. That's going up a level kind of thing. And so you need to have that as an option. The idea though is that this right here is sort of like gravity. You're trying to bring things down. You'll see this in a number of different points at different points of time in this field because of that nature between the verbal, nonverbal, and the violent, right? Sort of like this. If you were to do the use of force, I won't need to look back and check. So we got a separate one on use of force, so I can. No, we'll talk about the continuum stuff. But as a general rule, you probably have seen the use of force continuum before, so you know that it starts out with basically nothing, and then it moves into words, and then it moves into things that aren't words, right? But
Soft control.
And if you look at it, so it's like, okay, so from the get-go, it starts out with nonverbal, right? I'm going to be present. I'm just going to be there. Then it will move verbal, right? Things go upwards, yes. And then we might move back over here for number 3 kind of thing. And that's kind of an interesting thing because if you think of how the incident itself progresses, it's like at each point in time, you're trying to de-escalate it and trying to move it back towards this verbal side of things. It's sort of like trying to appeal to someone's higher reasoning to some degree. You can do it, but it's not something very easy. It'd be like de-escalation. I think the term that they've been thrown around for, I forget how long. But another one is like, you'll see that will be used by, used in different places, different kinds of things. If I said verbal judo, you've heard that term before, yes? Yeah. So if you haven't, what that is the same kind of thing. I'm going to use my words to get control of the situation because it's all that it is. De-escalations, to some degree, you can see the overlap with that, with kind of a spiritual kind of overlap. How do you know when you're doing it versus you're not? You know, those kinds of fun things. Actually, kind of talk about it. The best thing I can do is give you the inverse of it. Tell somebody who's worked up to calm down, right? One of those things. It's like, those are words you don't try to use. Calm down, calm down. You know, that kind of stuff is what happens if don't tell me to calm down. That kind of a thing. And so knowing those kinds of tactics and how that works, that's very useful stuff. But at some point in time, you have to know that it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, things are only going to go one way. There's 2 people involved and they have that specific. That's really important, but very difficult. Here it says, does not invert permissive or overly lenient style of policing. That's got to have to do with one's approach, that kind of thing, demeanor a little bit. Use appropriate when alternate officers escalating an incident. Avoids unnecessary use of force, that kind of stuff. So it's a first strategy kind of thing. Here's where they start talking about data on use of force. Yeah, they track that kind of stuff. You can any time that there's any contact at all, or reports written, it's like that's one of the things that's really interesting in a lot of these fields is just how many reports are generated. So there should always be associated reports with this kind of stuff anytime there's force. And so it'll tell you what happened in it. It will be reviewed and go up with the chain of command. And depending on what you specifically have in play, how it's reviewed may look different. It may just be supervisor oversight, or you may have something like a whole review team. You might have a board that does something like that. Sometimes you'll get those citizens review boards. I can't remember, one of these chapters probably talks about that. Where it's, you try to bring in population a little bit so they can start to understand what's going on. Here, that's might be where they start talking. No, that's where they talk about bias. We'll talk about that in a second, because that's one of those also baseline things misinterpreted. This thing and that thing. What do I want to say about that? Probably the interesting thing about the citizen review board stuff is sort of the issues that go on in determining whether or not force is excessive or not, or even called for kind of thing. Realize that what you're doing there is you're dealing with 2 different populations to some degree, those who have to do it and those who don't. And those who don't may not always be aware of what exactly takes place in it. That's why you have so many divergences in society when it comes to like, okay, I see this incident and what I see here is this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, right? really, really hard to do that. Realize that it's going to take months, if not years, for us to do it formally, and those snap decisions are usually wrong. It's bad information. Just getting people to understand how those things develop is very, very difficult. That'd be like talking about probably the clearest way I've ever put is the moment for any type of decision like this will be like 1/1,000,000th, 1/10000000th the size of the amount of time that anyone will actually consider it at trial. I forget how many thousands of times over it is, because it's going to be split second decision, and everyone's going to take months and years to actually review it before someone finally gets the information and says, here, what would you do? Right? Needs a policy on release of information about individual force incidences. That's it for communications and stuff. That's bad information getting out and trying to stay ahead of that, so that way it doesn't cause bigger problems. Like this next one. Patterns of systemic bias in routine law enforcement activities exist. I like to jump right there. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to jump right into racial profiling. Like, yeah, racial profiling is one of those examples of why that can happen, but it's not the only reason. But there's lots of different reasons, like there's develops differently across different places. Okay. Racial profiling. Yeah. Systemically stopping, searching, and arresting basically any group based on races. They'll identify African Americans there. I still don't get the naming conventions. Is it white? Is it black? Is it Caucasian? Is it African American? You're from Australia. You're Aboriginal. You still say African American. I hate that. I'll talk about that in just a second with this next thing, where I start talking about that bias stuff. Because some of it's real, some of it's not. And separating out the difference is one of those things that they don't do particularly well. So here we'll talk about violations of equal protections, damages for the relationships between the community and the police. Yes, those are all very, very public things. Here, what I want to say there, it would be like, so just can consent to search when there is no, that doesn't make statement. I know what it is here. They're just talking about police encounters themselves, asking people if they can search their vehicle, kind of thing.
Or search their backpack.
Yeah. Like, I just want to harass you. What's in there? No, you don't want me to look in there, so what's in there? You know, that kind of stuff. Here's what we'll talk about this in the next slide, I think. Yeah, preventing bias, unconscious bias. That thing right there, that's a nasty thing. Pay attention to what you're not aware of. That's a fun way to look at that. It's like, ooh. Here, we'll talk about biases related to race and ethnicity. It can be conscious and unconscious and deliberate. Conscious and deliberate, really, really bad. Right? Does that happen? Of course it does. It's like, of course it does. They tend to move over here to unconscious bias. Any ideas why? Going back 3 generations ago, what would happen? I'd say it openly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't hate blank race, whatever it is. It's like, okay. Not good.
You're not meaning to, but just all the things you've heard growing up.
Yeah, all that stuff stacks up too. What's really interesting
can influence you whether you know it or not.
And that's what's really interesting about this one, because the way that they do it. Typically, in I think these textbooks and that kind of stuff, most of this is based off of something called the implicit association test. Did I talk about that in here last time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might have been methods in that. At some point, one of the classes I'm in on Mondays, Wednesdays, they started talking about racial stuff. And so it's like, okay, here's what that test looked like. I'm going to show you a picture and a few words, and you're picking out where the best fits that picture. Right? And I'm going to do this over and over and over again across people. It's a lot of pictures. And as I look to see what pictures had what words associated with it, the words that seemed more negative are more frequently associated with race X. It's like, okay, there's a lot of stuff missing there. Who's being asked what? Are we talking about cross race, interrace, that kind of thing? What kinds of differences do we see there? And how do you attribute or account for novelty and familiarity? Right off the bat, that's novelty and familiarity. I'm familiar with one type of culture. This is a different one I'm not familiar with. I'm now uneasy. Yeah.
I saw a video, social experiment where somebody did that exact same thing. They held up a picture of 2 different people, One was of a Middle Eastern looking man. The other one was a white dude. And more times than not, most people said that they felt they felt scared of the Middle Eastern man. He looked like a terrorist, blah, blah. Turns out the dude was just a model. That's all he was. That was his daytime job. The white dude that they all pointed at and said he felt comfortable. He looked kind, blah, blah. It was can't think of his name right now, but he's the one that he was a serial killer, necrophile.
Is that the one with glasses or one without glasses?
Without glasses. He's the one that also killed like a bunch of sorority girls at Florida State University.
I don't remember that. So it's the ones I usually go to, or the Dahmer one, because of the Netflix thing.
He's a famous one.
Yeah.
Zac Efron just recently played him in a movie.
Yeah. That's mainly just because of the depiction, the whole flat affect. Can I take your picture? Like, that's disturbing. The other one that pops up in my mind.
Ted Bundy.
There you go, Ted Bundy.
It was Ted Bundy.
Yes.
It was Ted Bundy that held
The Night Stalker.
Yeah, Richard Ramirez.
Yes, that's another one. It's like that guy was on one of those dating shows and almost picked.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's very, very charismatic. Very, very, very. There's something going on there. What is that? Well, that guy's a predator, so he knows how to play on that stuff. That's exactly what he's doing. He's playing on these biases here.
It's also like a BTK. I can't remember his name, but the BTK guy. I mean, he was a deacon at his church.
Yeah. It's like, ooh. Yeah. And so how do you separate that out? Those who are trying to hide it and those who aren't. That's not easy. We can't just throw them all together, but we kind of have to right now to some degree. And so, like, how bad is this? It looks really bad, but it might not be as bad. It's one of those things. The tests we have we want to be great, and so we do our best. But yeah, what you're familiar with, you're more comfortable around. You'll have more positive things. Being in the unknown, it's like, oh, most people do not like that. And then because they have this number, they go and they do this training. Okay. If I have a bias that I'm unaware of, I've suddenly been made aware of it. What happens?
You just start working on it so that way you don't.
Maybe. Anybody ever had a stutter? Or been around someone start? Point out the fact that they're stuttering. What happens? It gets worse.
It gets worse.
Yeah, a lot of times you start paying attention, it gets worse. So sometimes it happens. I can't remember if that happened with this one, but some of the measures you'll see echoed in some of the things. It's like, we actually made it worse to some degree because now we're tracking it. That kind of thing. So it looks worse. It's like, nah, it's getting worse. No, actually, we're just starting to take account for it. Maybe we're not doing the part right. Thing. You're going to start paying attention to it. Okay. Now we're going to tell you how to deal with it. Like you're trying to train some unconscious part of me consciously. Ooh, good luck. Right. That's a bear. How do you know you're doing it right? I don't know. I'm not aware of it to begin with. Politics. I'm doing something. Is it really doing anything? No idea. Independent investigations, critical review of incidences. Here's what I talk a little about: citizen review boards, civil rights groups, that kind of stuff. Internal affairs, citizens oversights. They can investigate individual complaints, dispositions, make recommendations. Auditors, inspector generals generally do not investigate that kind of stuff. There's actually quite a bit when it gets to like complaints and how those things are handled and that kind of stuff. That's going to tie in a little bit to some of the, I think this will talk about it in terms of legitimacy and that kind of stuff. That interaction between the public and the police and its value, because there's a lot to be said there. Now from there, complex responsibilities, myth, crime fighter, reality, says order, maintenance, and peacekeeping. Be like talking about, again, report filing. Like a lot more report filing than there's chasing people. If you have to chase somebody, there's going to be a lot of report filing, that kind of a thing. Here's where I think they looks like they're getting into the crime fighter image, that kind of a thing. Click over here and see if it now move. Okay, good. And so this is what this is. You're starting to get a little bit with stereotypes and that kind of stuff, and the way that people historically look at this. I guess currently, maybe not historically. Talks about media and news, right? Police adopt a warrior mindsets. Like some people do, some people don't. It's one of those things that somebody start tying back into culture, that kind of a thing. All right. Emphasis on crime fighting. There you go. People don't realize the full scope of police activities. They have unrealistic expectations, and it also devalues some of the other stuff that we do. Some of the problems associated with crime fighting image. That first one's probably, actually, it's that second. That second one's probably the crux of the dilemma for most police. What people expect versus what they get versus what really is, kind of thing. Yeah. I usually whenever I talk about that, I talk about that role, protect and serve kind of things. Like they do that. That is somewhat of an expectation, but not a realistic one. When you get into it's like, do they have to protect you? Not necessarily. There's only a few instances where they're required to, and most people just expect it right off the bat. Ooh, got some problems there. Okay, ineffective strategies: aggression, saturation, sweeps, stump and frisks. So that's one of those things that's kind of a definitive statement that has some, you can argue with that quite a bit, right? If I go after something aggressively, it will tamp down for a while. It's like it will come back up though. So if I keep up with it, you start getting back. Oh, is that order maintenance or is that something, that kind of stuff? Saturation of high crime neighborhoods, what you start running into there is somewhat detection. There's more officers that are going to detect more stuff. Sweep arrests. Usually what they start doing with that kind of stuff is you start getting discriminatory practices to some degree. We're going to start targeting specific problems. Well, those are going to aggregate across people differently. Stop and frisk programs. That's actually a really fun one. When else said that's like, I think I may have mentioned it here. It's like presidential candidates in 2016 both spoke on the Stop and Frisk program. I said that correctly, Stop and Frisk. They both got it wrong. They're both wrong. It's like they're both just wrong. One said it was unconstitutional. The other one said it was just fine. It's like neither of those things is correct. It's only constitutional if you do it right. What happened was New York wasn't. And so what they were doing is they were targeting minorities on purpose. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of a problem. But if you're doing it correctly, it's a good way to, hey, there's a bit of a random check to see if there might be weapons or other stuff in the population you might not want to carry. Right? It's just figuring out where that point is. Maybe remains to be seen because we haven't figured it out. Yeah, there's a lot we haven't figured out. Okay. Effective strategies for crime control, that kind of stuff. Here's where we start getting crime prevention areas. They focus here on 3 areas. Everybody does this part a little bit different. This is a policing book. It's not. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to do it. Hotspots policing. Basically, we start dealing with areas. Everyone knows what a hotspot is. You see a map, you see a big red dot, that kind of thing. As soon as you relate to how many crimes are in the area. Deterrence. Basically, you start focusing in on you're trying to, increase the certainty, celerity, and whatever the other word is. Basically, likelihood, certainty, severity, and celerity. Likelihood, the severity, how hard it is, and how quickly those types of problems get resolved, right? Those types of crimes. And so probably when we're policing would be taking one step backwards. Like, we've got these crimes kind of things. What do we think the driving factors are for these crimes? Can we start to address that? Maybe. Right. Here's where I start talking a little about problem-oriented policing. You get in the terminology here. All these things have very, very direct meanings. It gets hard to kind of distinguish them as we go, though, because you're going to see different terms in the course of this textbook, like things like community policing, community-oriented policing, problem-oriented policing. See what else is it? There's a couple other types of policing.
Task-oriented.
Yeah, it's like there's and so it's to some degree, it's like, is it a buzzword or is it a real thing? It's like, well, to some degree, it's a little bit of both, right? If I said neighborhood policing kind of thing, it's like, okay, are we talking community policing? We're just talking about walking in the neighborhood. Are we talking about, well, they're walking in the neighborhood. They're actually doing community-oriented policing. It's just they don't realize it because they're actually just treating it by other people, right? That kind of thing. So it's like it's really, really hard to kind of nail that thing down. That's one of the reasons why we have that nothing works kind of era. It's really hard to deal with. Yeah, these represent proactive approaches rather than reactive. Reactive is like the 911 calls, times to on scene kind of stuff, response times. What I want to say there. Very interesting because we start dealing with proactive versus reactive, realize that to some degree everything in this field has to be reactive. If we get proactive, we're potentially going to violate somebody's rights very easily. Ooh, be very careful. Okay, partnerships with the public. It says enable police to be aware of neighborhoods, residents' concerns. Basically, what this is starting to tie into that community side of things. Like, as you do it, depending on the specific community you're in, it's gonna look different. It's like you might just get to know a few key people in a small residential area kind of thing. It might be that you actually have organizations and groups of people that meet regularly that you go and start making ties to. That kind of thing. If that's the case, as you're meeting with them, the ideas that they have for the area versus yours, you can start to align those and work together. It's a good thing. Partnerships. What else does it say? We already talked about that. The roles that they have. Sources of all things. You're public. Like, they're the sources of criminals, they're the sources of crimes, they're the sources of information related to crimes, are also the sources for the police themselves. Welcome to people, right? Here they're going to talk about crisis intervention teams next. I know very little about that. I don't remember anything about that. Mental health crisis kind of stuff. See what they say next. Mental health background, so you can recognize certain things, certain dangers, and then how to deal with those specific problems as you're trying to de-escalate, right? You're dealing with someone who doesn't understand the concept between inanimate object and person. It's like the way you attack that's going to be a little bit different, and hopefully you don't necessarily need to attack it. Let's see more on that. Yeah, it's more just tying into community stuff there. I'm gonna move a little faster through that one. Cool. Research, policing, evidence-based programs. This is where a lot of things are going, actually. More and more time moves forward, more data becomes available, more people get access to it. That's one of those things that anytime you see data-driven decisions, database decisions, evidence-based decisions, they're all talking about the same kinds of things. They're actually starting to look at history to determine how things will go, so that way they can start to basically move the directions they need things to move in. Right. Several programs of crime disorder based on empirical. Smart policing. Yeah, whatever. Okay. History. It was definitely male in the 1950s. Okay, so we should probably talk a little about history in terms of this country. I don't think we need to have any talks about constitutional stuff, do we? Everyone knows that they have constitutional rights, yes. Oh God, there's a lot more silence than I expected. Okay. So be familiar with that. I'm not going to go into governmental processes and all that. In terms of history, we're based from English. That kind of stuff, the English. If you really trace it back, you look for evidence. I have an evidence class later today. At some point, probably next week. I'm going to go a little bit through some of the history so you can see where these concepts come from. Basically, what you need to realize is people, if you want to do it from the anthropological side, what you'll see is as people spread across places, some settle, some keep moving. Some of those ideas travel with those people. Those good ideas usually lead those places to do really, really well until the people who have those ideas either go away or are killed. It's like, and then there you go. Historically, what you start talking about is England, that kind of stuff, the hue and cry system, tithings and families and that kind of stuff. I can't remember how much this will get into, but I'm going to go pretty fast because some of it's pretty boring, but it's important to know. Basically, what it was is until relatively recent history, so basically in the last 100 years, this role was your role. No one else's. It's like, hopefully you were a member of a family, you have enough people around, that kind of thing. So then you have some type of influence. If you were tied to the land, that kind of a thing, if there were crimes, basically what happened is they had tithings in hundreds. So 10 members from each family, 10 families is 100 people, that kind of a thing. That's how they mobilized. So it was very informal. Still developed into many things. If I said Shire Reeve, you know what I'm talking about, right? Shire Reeve. We still have those, sheriff, right? You know, just think about the Hobbits and J.R.R. Tolkien, the Shire, kind of stuff he's pulling off. And so, coming over from England, it's going to tie into metropolitan development, that kind of a stuff. Basically, we start looking at is England. If you're talking about police over in England, usually looking at the word they'll be referred to as bobbies. That's Robert Peel. Also referred to as peelers sometimes. But that's why they're called bobbies. He's the guy who started the tax-based system for funding the police. And so with him, that's where that actually picks up and is exported here to our big cities. I want to say it was in the late 19th century kind of thing, where it really starts to take roots, but we'll see what this thing says. So it talks a little bit about first American police officer. Yeah, you don't have any of those things. You're just a person. In the 1950s, so that's kind of a jump right there. Whole lot of stuff happening there. And we'll see how it brings that kind of stuff up, because if there's any of that bias or definitive statements, there shouldn't be. I'll point that out. 1950s, yeah, you're talking about basically male. Really, what you start talking about the different eras of policing, and different books, different people classify it different ways. Usually, what they'll do is they'll start talking about the political era. That's its first start, because it's going to be tied in directly to politics. You're now bringing political money to fund the police. They're going to be the direct arm of whatever political body's in position. In fact, if you look at the writings of the times, you'll see that's exactly the case. I'm trying to remember where I've seen the story. It was it's an immigrant story coming straight off of the boat kind of thing in Chicago, the early 1900s, or was it late? I can't remember, but somewhere in that time frame, late 800s, early 1900s, right off the boat. Police, direct right this way. Here's where you're going to live. Here's where you're going to stay. Here's who we work for. So this is who you should vote for come the next election time. That's how it goes. Sounds familiar. Like how much things change, how little they change. Like, yeah, we still do that. Okay. So 1950s, you're talking male. Basically what it was is it started out as a male thing. You're picked by political affiliation or physical characteristics. How tall are you? How physically intimidating are you? Most important to the party kind of thing. Here it mentions received police academy training. Some departments never in-service training. Okay, here's where it actually goes into the history. That's good, because I was going to say, but just those are the highlights there. It's like that kind of sucks. Here, why I understand history, because stuff happens repeatedly. We don't learn. Okay, so there's that English heritage where it starts talking about police authority, local control. That's where that starts out. It's tied to the families, it's tied to the areas. Ours is decentralized to keep that centralized authority from creating too much distance there. That's sort of what you'll see in areas where you can start to see it starts to become who you are relative to everyone else in the system for how you're treated rather than what you've done. That kind of thing. Let's see, decentralized fragmented system. We talked about that. Here's where he talks about Robert Peel. So it was early 1800s kind of stuff is where he starts to move that. I was thinking late 1800s. Yep. Bobbies are still known as that. Innovation of this police force was mission of crime prevention. Okay, whatever. Here's where it talks a little about the watch. So you had, day watch, night watch kind of things in old times. Prison started out with like night watch, that kind of stuff. That's what's most closely mirrored that of police in the big cities. Other than that, you're dealing with sheriffs and that kind of stuff. Here it mentions inefficient corruptions, political interference. Yes, your authority there, kind of a nil issue. Not really equipped for anything because you're talking context. Bunch of people out in the woods. Ordinary citizens maintained informal control. That's how they did it. Okay. So 18s and 30s, that stuff starts moving from London to here. And then you have that shift over. Notice it mentions quasi-military in design. Yeah. Visibility, structure. It's also where you get the uniform too, to some degree. Way to identify where you have consistency across people. That kind of stuff. So that's why it took that form. Okay.
The first police in America was the military, and before we started going to the Robert Peel type of reform.
Oh yeah, fun stuff. Fun times. We start getting into that. That's fun stuff. Talking about that. Talking about political era. Yeah, jobs or patronage. Local politicians use reform for work friends. Yeah. When you start getting into the weird stuff, you have the military stuff. You also have like the slave patrols and that kind of stuff. So I'm really curious to see if they mention that in here, because that's one of those ones that's, if you think about it, yes, but also if you think about it, no. because if it brings up, we'll talk about it all, and at any rate, I'll talk about it here in a second, because now it's on my mind. Let me actually scroll through this to see if it mentions it in there. Formers, corruption. Yeah, so here it talks about patrol work. You're on foot, spread thin, no way to get around, no way to communicate. So basically, you're just walking around kind of thing. So you deal. Here it mentions corruption, that kind of stuff. Political era. There we go. Yeah, no vision. After that, look, commissioners by Theodore Roosevelt conducted campaign to clean up police departments. If you actually look back at Theodore Roosevelt, I said, walk softly.
Speak softly, but carry a big stick.
There you go. I couldn't remember it. There you go. Excellent, excellent. What was he also known for as by those who work for the police? Like, I'm trying to figure out a way to lead you into it. Just saying it myself. I'm just going to say it then. One of the things that he terrified police officers. So they all you can see are the whites of his eyes and his big smile coming, right? Because he'd actually show up while they're on the job, right? Just walking down a dark alley. Look, that's the guy himself. Oh God, yeah. It's like that's different, right? Impact there. Yeah. I'm trying to see if it mentions there. It is in the next slide. Vollmer. So Vollmer is actually the one who's known as the father of our discipline, academic discipline. Berkeley. I'd have to look. I think it's in the next slide. I think it's Berkeley. I don't know where it came from. He was a police chief out that. The father of our academic discipline. One of the reasons why we have professionalism. That's the reason for the uniform. That kind of thing. To give it more structure, even more legitimacy. That kind of a stuff. And so you see that start to happen today, and that's still a major influence. So that's when it starts moving into the professional era, thing like that with him. Yeah, removing politics, getting more qualified people, raising standards, putting a structure in. See here, introduces. I'm trying to remember what I need here. I don't remember this person. But they'll talk about this kind of stuff too. This is important because they'll go through the earliest, like, this person's going to be important in terms of history. That's not the earliest police woman, though. And you'll find really interesting. You'll start seeing it's like, okay, whether you're dealing with male, female, or demographics, it's like you'd be surprised how early some of those things, those groups start to move in, and those issues start to be addressed to some degree. Yeah, police departments in Milwaukee, Susanna Berkeley, leaders in the field. I'm associated with higher education as well. Okay. Professional art of the 1960s. Greatest failure was controlling officer conduct. If you start getting into like the cases that took place in the 1960s, basically look from the gaps between the 1920s to the 1960s, 40 years, you'll see a huge change in society. Huge one. It's going to deal with some of the places we can catch it more on the legal side if you read it over there. Basically, when you start in like the 1920s, racism is so bad that you can have people who are hung repeatedly, forced into false confessions, and been convicted to death. Finally, get to the Supreme Court and get basically some form of redress there. That's in the 1920s. By the 1960s, you start to move into where it's like, yeah, if you don't actually give that person a lawyer well in advance, you don't have a lawyer. If you don't. Here when it talks about where I see it, conduct part, the exclusionary rule is a big example of that, where it's if there's a violation of someone's individual rights, that actually is more important than any evidence we get against them. So we'll kick that out. That was only created because of issues with officer conduct at the time. Adverse effects. More centralized and authoritarian. Yeah, you have hope that it's led well, that kind of a thing. And so, not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. Here, let's start talking about police strikes, police states, that kind of stuff. State police. Don't remember that. Okay. So it gives a little bit of a financial surprise, doesn't give you more of a time frame. Book will. And when state police start getting creative, the Bureau of Investigation, it's founded, that kind of stuff. it'll give you some of the timelines for that. You know, Marshal Service came at this point in time, then it's this one, it's that kind of stuff. Texas Rangers, State Constabulary, I said that correctly. And you gotta get the stage for how society's changing. Everything's kind of forming, becoming more structured. As it does, new problems emerge, and how we interact with people become problems. That's not changed much in some ways. In a lot of ways, it's changed a lot. When you start looking at the next thing, they'll start talking about the technological aspects of that's the first one, the patrol car. Why? You can now move around, but also I can't necessarily directly interact with you all the time. And so mentions for First World War, and by the 1920s, widespread use. 1920s, we're getting prohibitionaries. You guys probably have seen depictions of that kind of stuff. People running out, all that kind of stuff. The earliest ones, I'm trying to remember where it was. Steam engines. Interesting thing was some of the reasons conveyed for its use is because it raised where people were seated, so they're actually taller than if they were walking, and so I could look over people's fences to see what's going on in their yard. So its first use was to spy. No, I'm just kidding. See, two-way radio, telephone, all those types of things to allow increased communication. Of course, that's changed quite a bit because we'll talk about it in a few slides probably when it starts talking modern era, modern technologies. Massively more powerful, massively more useful. Next one, here's where it starts talking about police administrations. Here's the liquor. You start looking at any of these commissions, what you will see is a lot of echo. A lot of echo. Here's where it talks about professionalism, O.W. Wilson. There you go, management, that kind of stuff. Police organizations, leadership. Here it's going to mention another one, the Zoot Suit riot. Just different types of riots, different types of social events that have taken place. Typically, what you'll see, I think I mentioned it here already, that as you see, is there any type of social issue that takes place, the organizational response, kind of the way our society responds is, there's going to be some type of official action, whether it's a committee formed, something to review a commission, that kind of a thing. They'll investigate and come with recommendations. Though some of those will be instituted, some of those won't, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to policing, there's heavy overlap, heavy echo across time. It'd be like saying, I want to say the Brady Commission, I can't remember if that's where it was or not. 1990s. I think I mentioned in here, Rodney King, right? 1991 was Rodney King. 1992 was the riot. Why?
The LA riots.
Mm-hmm.
Due to police misconduct and abuse.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you an example of that one? That one was basically the first real video camera. Now, you see someone who's literally being beaten by was it a dozen officers kind of thing, and it was a beating. That wasn't an arrest. That was a beating. What happened in the next year was I can't remember if they were acquitted of all charges or if they were not even charged. That's what started the riots. Yeah. And so as that started happening, you get commission or whatever it was, I can't remember what it was, but that's a common thing. When we start talking about corruption, that kind of stuff, we'll talk about some of those at that point in time. We start talking a little about certain because when I like to talk about there, it's so clear what happened with him. Yeah. All right. J. Edgar Hoover beamed up and became manipulative and used his power. So that's kind of a definitive statement there. Yeah, there's problems anytime you have power. Okay. 1960s, Miranda. That's one of the biggest changes in policing. There's a lot of them there in that time period and in policing. Miranda, basically what it was is now you have to tell people their rights related to speech and silence and loiter. Realize that at that time, while it's a law of the land now, that was a split decision. And about 24 years ago, there's another case that went through year 2000 that actually brought up some, I think it was a congressional act that went through in the 60s, where they tried to overrule Miranda. So Congress tried to overrule the Supreme Court decision related to this, right? In the 60s, it stayed on the books for 40 years almost, and then they tried to bring it back to use it against somebody, right? Interesting case there. That's a Dickerson versus United States, 2000, in the year 2000. Can't remember the actual citation. If you read that, that's an interesting one. You talk about that and procedures, that kind of stuff. Whenever you take procedures. Okay, let's see. Decisions. They provoke new training, supervision, policies, that kind of stuff, and may develop new systems. Basically, what they're talking about there is this is a reactive system. It is alive, just like the Supreme Court is alive, just like the Constitution itself and through its Supreme Court's decisions. It's a living thing. As the Supreme Court makes decisions, sometimes allowed to enact any changes that they've made, but for them to be incorporated into how we handle policing. So be like, in that time frame, this case comes through, the next day, no, you're not going to be advising people of their right to remain silent, that kind of stuff. But after a certain period of time, that will become expected. If you don't do that, then you're in violation of that. Okay. Next up, the 1960s, riots, long, hot summers. An African-American was shot and killed by a New York police officer. That's the Kerner Commission. All right, next one. President's Crime Commission. That's not doing stuff. That's a different one. Research, they point to this one, Kansas City Preventative Patrol Experiment. That's when we first started kind of bringing the research side directly into some of these areas. Basically, what they did is they took Kansas City and they divided it in a few different areas. I can't remember exactly how they divided it. It was basically 3 areas. One where they don't make any changes, one where they increase patrol, one where they take it away. Right? Trying to find out the role that patrol really does have related to prevention. Does it do anything? I can't remember if it was this one or one of the replications, but they did it again somewhere else. In some places they find yes, some places they find no. That one in particular, that one had some problems because police officers were aware that some areas were not getting patrolled. So whenever they're going to respond to calls, they take their time and drive through those areas. And so it's one of those things. It's like, how much does it have? How much is it? And how much do people influence it? Don't exactly know, but we can start getting there. Okay, new developments from the 1970s to present. Demographics, big changes in the population here in our society related to that, and in policing as a result. Administrative rulemaking model, new rules for deadly force is what they're talking about there. Unions have spread, community policing, community-oriented policing, problem-oriented policing, and a few other types. Early intervention systems, like right systems for police accountability. So that'd be like tracking if someone has any use of force incidences, start seeing trends and that kind of stuff, and identifying that before it becomes something where in greater danger kind of stuff. You're increasing liabilities there. I already talked about racial profiling. Your national police crisis, 2014 to present. Legitimacy and procedural justice are the focuses there. So we've already talked about legitimacy. That's how people view it in terms of the authority to it. Procedural justice is one of those things that gives legitimacy to things. Are you following the proper procedures? Are you following the proper, is it being fair kind of thing? Jeff Sessions, he canceled the pattern of practice program. That's going to have to do with how they establish basically, for it to be a pattern, there needs to be more than one incident kind of thing. So increasing scrutiny, unprecedented wave of accountability related reform. So they had to change everything in some ways. Okay. State legislatures, 79 laws changed just in this 1 year kind of thing related to it. Wide range of issues, continued research, that kind of stuff. Here it picks up with 2014 and crises, picks up with Ferguson. That's kind of where it stops off. As you know, by everyone knows. It's not going to stop at Ferguson. It'd be like saying, if I said the name, I could pick any name, really. There are so many names there that people learn the names and they pick up that story rather than the picture of the whole society. Does it in general society to some degree? Yes, but no. Ferguson, you guys are familiar with that case already? Yes. Other ones, probably the most, I don't know what that would be the biggest one. You got that one, that's Michael Brown. You got George Floyd. You got Ahmaud Arbery. There's I'm trying to think of the big ones that have come through in the last few years. There's a female one I can't
Sandra
remember.
Blair.
Yeah, that's another one. I mean, there's all kinds of them.
Most recent one is Sonia Massey.
I don't remember that one.
That just happened about like 2 months ago.
Okay, that's why I don't remember.
It's pretty black and white. You should look into it and watch the video.
Yeah, that's the problem. If you get caught with something, it's like you can miss some good stories and bad stories is what I mean by that. But yeah, that's going to be one that's an ongoing thing related to the part of that's the information, part of that's the system and how it works, and part of that's the people's and their perspectives and who's trying to get what, that kind of a thing. And some of that's not always clear and straightforward. And yeah, support enormous burst of police reform, heightened awareness of nominally neutral, race neutral crime fighting policies that can result in significant racial disparities. What do they mean by that? If it's a race neutral policy, why is it increasing disparities? The policy itself would meet due process, right? Everyone would be treated equally, but we still see this racial disparity. Is it a form of the process, or is there something else there? You can't tell. That's the hard thing here. We're aware of it, but the way that we tell is not very easy. It's not straightforward. And like I said, I was going to tell you correctly in some of these things. And so,
even though it's race neutral, the result of racial disparity could also be that unfortunately more minorities live in lower income, more higher crime areas. So even though it's race neutral, that's what the majority of crime is.
Oh yeah. And that's one of those things that's like good example would be
so it would still cause
it would be like equality, equal outcomes was an equity thing that people talk about, and zero tolerance. You want everything to be equal, it's zero tolerance. That's the only way you do that. That's taking everything down. Right? What will happen with that in the first wave is that those who have that disparity there in terms of income, which will have a racial component there, they're going to be hit hardest. Right? But everyone's treated fairly. So what is it? You want to treat everyone fairly, or do you want to change who we're dealing with, change what we're dealing with based on the group of people that the person we're dealing with belongs, or deal with the individual instance itself? Like all different things. And now you have to think about it in each way. So it just got a bit more complex, didn't it? That kind of wraps up this chapter. I'm trying to remember what the next chapter is. I think I just wrote chapter 3 on this thing, didn't I? I did. I was lazy. That's gonna be over here. Back over here. Let's see what it is in chapter 3. That's one accelerating. Oh, I went 1 week too far. Kind of this one. That's gonna be industry. That kind of stuff. So we'll move pretty quickly through that because most of that stuff we already know. With that, do you all have any questions? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll be getting out. Let's see what I say. The next thing is quiz. So I'll probably post that out a little bit later today, maybe tomorrow. Could be Friday. But at any rate, what I'll do is if I don't get up until next class Monday, you'll have at least a week to complete it. You'll always get at least a week.
I have a question.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you go through what happened with assignment 1?
Oh, I haven't put it out yet. So assignment 1 here is that's what it is. Assignment 1 should come out first. I flipped those in my head. So that's the one I'll put out first. Assignment 1 in here. I'm trying to remember if I was going to change or if I'm going to use what I used last time. I'd have to go back and look in that other class, and I can't do that without pulling up people's assignments kind of stuff. So I'll have to look back at that to see what it was I had you guys doing in here for that first assignment. Usually it's pretty straightforward stuff. Kind of give you guys an idea for my last class, crim law. Their first thing is I gave them the scenario and break it down, try to identify laws. For here, I don't think it's, I can't remember if it's organizational or not. Because at one point I'll have you look up some organizational stuff so you can kind of see how all that structure flows. And I think that's my first one, because what it'll do is it'll place those different structures kind of in tandem with our governmental entities to some degree. But let me look back at that one. I should know that one by Monday. And so I'll start with that one, not the quiz. But the quizzes, whenever I do the quizzes, typically what I do is you'll get a few questions kind of thing. probably 60 minutes to do it. And sometimes I give 3 attempts if it's a small pool. If it's a larger pool, sometimes it might be unlimited. So you'll have a few attempts at it and plenty of time. That kind of a thing. And then with that, I think, yeah, that's what we should actually put, not assignment 1, not quiz 1. Thank you for that. With that, I think that gets me for today. I will see you bright and early on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Sounds good. Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye.